Good evening, folks. This is Brad Johnson. You're watching Baseball A-Team Reviews Paul Sporer's Top 100 Starting Pitchers. Today we're going to be taking a gander at an article Paul wrote yesterday and published, releasing his early 2019 off-season pitcher values. So I'm just going to put that right up on screen. There's a link to it in the description below, so you can click into the article and follow along. First, let's touch on the glob, which is a term Paul coined last spring, I guess it was, and we all kind of caught on with it. It refers to all those very many pitchers who fall in the same kind of tier. They're not exactly good, not exactly bad. You can use them in most fantasy leagues, but you're not going to win based on a build around only those guys. You need to figure out some tricks, whether that's finding a slew of Josh Haders or just rostering some aces along with these glob types. And we'll get into some examples of those later. Let's just drop straight down this top 100 list and do it by tiers. First tier, you got Max Scherzer to Carlos Carrasco. That's 14 players, and you're mostly looking at the big names. You know, you expected these guys to be up here. Maybe you think Steven Strasburg, Zach Greinke, Mike Clevenger, Walker Buehler. Maybe you think they're part of this group too. But for the most part, you know, we're looking at a healthy group of pitchers that is going to go pretty early in your draft and also should be counted on to supply some big numbers. Not all of these are safe. Corey Kluber backslid this year. Luis Severino had his ups and downs. Trevor Bauer finished on the disabled list. James Paxton's always finding ways to be injured. And Carrasco in particular feels like someone who might be on borrowed time. I say that only because he's had a number of injury issues over the years. He's always been a minus fastball guy who gets away with it because his off-speed stuff's so good. Command's really good too. But if anything backslides, could turn into a bit of a mess. And even a small backslide gets you into tier 2 with Madison Bumgarner. Used to generally sit around where Aaron Nola is right now. And now all the way back to 23, just because of some modest injuries that have really affected his ability. So yeah, touching on this second tier, it's an interesting group. You got a mix of kind of up-and-comers like German Marquez. Clevenger is a big breakout guy. Walker Buehler, Jameson Taillon. Even Patrick Corbin and Zach Wheeler. But then there's some guys who backslid. Tanaka kind of started here and stayed steady. Kyle Hendricks was maybe a little better regarded last year. The command and control profile is fine. You're not getting big strikeout totals, though, and that holds you back. David Price isn't what he used to be. Zach Greinke isn't what he used to be. And, of course, Bumgarner isn't quite what he used to be either. Miles Mikolas is an interesting one because he was so cheap for the Cardinals, and that's feels like a missed opportunity by so many teams on someone who broke out overseas and no one was willing to buy. Moving into this third tier, more risk, same reward. Charlie Morton in particular stands out to me as someone who could probably be in that second tier. I think we're maybe penalizing him too much for concerned that he might retire. But assuming he does play, assuming he's signed by a good team, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case on a one-year contract. I think Morton's probably a better value than 34th overall. Luis Castillo is everyone's favorite spring fling, I'll call him. Struggled out of the gate and picked it up again on the back end of the season. Kind of reminiscent of 2017 in that regard. He finished strong, and it really inflated his price. 31 is a little pricey for me. It's the home park as much as the performance this year. Even if you're having a really strong season, it only takes a few bad weeks to really torpedo those roto values. I think I like him a little bit more in an H2H format. Where you can kind of manage around his cold streaks, manage around his home games if he's not pitching quite up to snuff. And when he does get hot, you're on him. Moving on to this fourth tier, we're starting to look at that blob. So 43 through 66. We're calling the same tier, and these are an interesting mix of pitchers. Kenta Maeda lost his starter job, but had a really strong season when he was pitching in general. As a reliever, he pitched well. As a starter, he pitched well. It's just a matter of he makes short outings, and the Dodgers seem to like to keep his innings limited. Hyunjin Ryu, another Dodger, another free agent. He had a nice breakout season, finally showing some health and consistency. Up next to Kyle Freeland, who has the extreme command control profile, could easily fit in the same bucket as Kyle Hendricks, but obviously hasn't proven it over the same number of years. The command and control types also, I was talking about the fineness of Carlos Carrasco, the small margin of error, and command and control types have that too, especially when they call Coors Field home. So Kyle Freeland looking risky to me. At the same time, I feel fine about this valuation at 44. I don't think Sporer missed at all. In fact, I would maybe even take him a few above some of these guys ahead of him. Cole Hamels, for example, Nate Eovaldi. I'm a little more hesitant to go out on a 36. Even Ross Stripling at 35, also a little hesitant with. Others from this tier here, the Rodriguez to Sanchez tier. Interesting that the tier ends in Sanchez. There's three names I was looking to see where they fell on the list. Anibal Sanchez, Mike Fiers, and Derek Holland. I consider them all very similar. The profile in terms of expected stats, about 8.5 strikeouts per 9, about 2.5 walks per 9. There's some variation in the walk rate. ERAs in the mid threes, probably decent whips as a result of the low walk rate. And then also history of very inconsistent performances. All three are veterans, been in the league a long time, and have had some really terrible seasons lately. All coming off a strong season, though. See Anibal Sanchez at 66. He's the first one of those to show up. One more name I want to call out from this group, Shane Bieber. I think he's an ace in the making. And if there's anyone I wanted to bet on this tier, it'd be Bieber, Rick Porcello, John Gray. Those are the three I'd probably go out of my way to get from this part of the glob. This next part of the glob, a little riskier, but still some good pitchers. Alex Ray is the highest ceiling of them, but he's coming back from Tommy John surgery, and that's always a risk. Julio Urias looked pretty good in the playoffs, and in general, late in the year, he barely showed up, but when he did pitch, he looked pretty good. So let's see what he has next year. A decent gamble compared to a Marco Gonzalez, in my opinion. Trevor Cahill seems to fade late in the year, so I'd buy early, try to sell mid-season. And if you can get something out of that, great. If not, at least you got the early season stats, which are probably going to be pretty decent. CC Sabathia, I think, is probably pretty overrated at this price. We'll see. But I think he is someone who can easily fit outside of the top 100. And rounding out the last of the list, Lucas Giolito to Tyler Anderson. Anderson would benefit from not being at Coors Field. Giolito showed some improvement in the second half, was a streamable pitcher, but not really someone you want to own. I think that's kind of where he's going to end up for 2019, in that streamable range. I'd much rather gamble on Marcus Stroman rebound. Even Josh James breakout if he's getting that opportunity. Here's Mike Fiers, I was talking about earlier. Second of those three pitchers to show up, and you'll notice Derek Holland did not make the top 100. Much rather have Holland than CC Sabathia, but that's nitpicking. We're all even from, let's say around from Kevin Gausman down to Tyler Anderson. We're looking at pretty flat valuation. Maybe Gausman's like 10-15% better than Anderson down here. There's a few guys I like more. There's a few guys I like less. We're all going to have different opinions. Overall, I think it's a great first crack at a top 100. There's nothing absurd. There are some guys I think will fall off, especially back end guys who maybe won't get the opportunity. And Paul even talks about this a little bit in the intro. Atuki Toussaint, Sandy Alcantara, they might not have the chance to start enough games to really be mixed 12-team mixed league guy. And that's what we're looking for in a top 100 is 12-team mixed. So this was Brad Johnson for Baseball A-Team Reviews, Paul Sporer's top 100 starting pitchers. I don't produce my own rankings lists anymore because I have specific problems with rankings. I don't like them. I think they produce handicaps and approach. I rather look at pitchers as assets and asset tiers, and that's where concepts like the glob come in. And when you're looking at the top 50 or 50 to 100th pitcher as being pretty flat in value, that tells me that if you can, grab one of these top guys, grab two of the top guys, and then you're looking for skills later in the draft. Depending on which of these guys you got, if you happen to got like Mikolas or Hendricks, try to find a Nick Pivetta or some other 10 strikeout per 9 pitcher with some issues. Or else, if you got high strikeout guys, Justin Verlander, Garrett Cole, Mike Clevenger, if those are your so-called aces, then you can play it a little more safe and take some guys who produce low whips, good ERAs, and maybe only like 8 to 9 strikeouts per inning. And that should help round out your pitching stats, and it's a topic for another day to go in more detail. Take care, folks.